So today's video, I just want to talk about basically my 1 year anniversary of being an attorney. I'm going to talk about some of the pros and cons and if the expectations were met. And I will start off by saying like what type of law I work in. So I am an attorney in the finance and bankruptcy practice group at my firm. This practice group is kind of hybridish, kind of weird because it should be considered two separate practice groups, but because there is a bit of an overlap in some of the concepts that we see on a day to day, they decided to just make it into one practice group. Plus, bringing it up into two, it would be really small practice groups, so they just decided to combine it. On the finance side, it's very transactional work, financing. When I mean by financing, I really mean by like lending money. A lot of the clients that we deal with is banks, big lenders, institutionalized investors. No, sorry, institutionalized banks that lend and finance other entities for whatever reason they need money for. And in that side of my practice group, it is a lot of drafting contracts. It is a lot of reviewing documents, reviewing due diligence, and just dealing with the whole transactional side of things. The bankruptcy side is a little bit different because that one it involves the courts a lot more. Even though it's not a purely litigation practice group, or at least a lot of people can argue that it's not. It does involve the courts, and you can potentially go to litigation, but even then, usually they would bring in an actual litigator, an actual attorney that does that for a living, because that's not what the bankruptcy attorneys, at least the ones that I work with, specialize in. Our goal is if a company is not doing so well, and that company hires us as a potential debtor in a bankruptcy, we either help them to try to figure out how to avoid bankruptcy, or if the best option is to file for bankruptcy, how to either restructure their organization if it's a restructuring type of bankruptcy, or just help them through like a liquidation, a bankruptcy, if that's what their goal is. I usually see Chapter 11 bankruptcies, although I haven't had too much experience with dealing with a lot of bankruptcies on the bankruptcy side, at least not in the coreness of what a bankruptcy entails. But I have seen a couple of things. As a first year, I'm not going to be filing most of the important documents in a bankruptcy. So what I've been helping is just a lot of legal research, drafting, sometimes a couple of motions, and also I did file one proof of claim. That was nice. And the proof of claim is that in this case you're a potential creditor. If an entity goes into bankruptcy, and they owed you money, and you want to file a proof of claim to that money, then you do that. There's a form that you have to file. You file with the courts and telling them no. It's like, hey, I want to be part of this bankruptcy. I am a potential creditor. They owe me so and so. Here's the proof to back it up, and that's just to put your foot in the door, and then they have to go through the entire phase of the bankruptcy, and then maybe there's a plan, maybe there's not a plan, maybe something settles with certain creditors. It's a long thing. A lot is involved. This isn't an intro to bankruptcy class. I think you'll get bored, but the experiences that I had with the bankruptcy side of things was cool. I really like the people that I work with on both sides. I really like the transactional side too. I really like the financing side. I don't really mind sitting in front of my computer and just drafting very boring, very tedious legal writing. I don't mind that at all. I actually prefer that in some cases than having to be in drafting and writing very creative motions, descriptive motions. I'm not very creative, as you can tell by this YouTube channel, as you can tell by my monotone voice. I don't come off as an artistic, creative person. So, transactional side, I enjoy a lot more. Just the drafting portion of it. I like both sides, but at least the drafting portion of it, I enjoy it because I feel like I have a better handle of it simply by the type of writing that is required from me. But From the, just to give a little bit more perspective of what I've done on the financing side, I've drafted some amendments to some credit agreements. I have drafted amendments to some loan agreements. I've drafted opinions for my firm. All these are just like documents. There's usually a form. I work in a big enough firm that already has forms with language that we kind of use for every single deal. So I haven't necessarily drafted anything from scratch. And I likely probably won't ever. I do want to eventually because I just want to see my capabilities, but there's always a form and you just have to change some information. I'm looking forward to eventually when I am a high enough level where I'll be able to involve a lot more in the negotiating part of deals. But I don't know the law that well, nor do I know like the standards of certain things and what's going on in the market to truly be helpful in that sense. And that's just going to come with time and with more exposure to this, and also just me um, trying to learn and read up on like what's going on. But yeah, it's been it's been a great experience, all things considered. I very much like the people that I work with, and I'm actually very happy to say that because something that I've always heard when I was in law school about applying for like these big law firms is that a lot of people just hated the experience. Uh, uh, One part of it was the gruesome work that they had to do, and it's not the work necessarily that's difficult. It's the pressure, it's the stress, and it's the urgency, and it's the amount of work that you have to do. But the other side of things that I kept hearing horror stories about is that the people that you work with are just plain mean. The legal field still has a very old fashioned rhetoric, at least some places do, where they very much believe in the hierarchy of things, which is fine. Obviously, someone who's a partner or has been there for a decade, they definitely need to have some respect compared to a junior. But then they let it out in a very not nice, very straightforward type of way. And I am thankful to report that I haven't really had any of that experiences. Even when I make a mistake, I own up to it. I think the people that I work with respect that I own up to it. And usually I catch my mistake when it's not too late, and I'm able to correct it. So it really is just a lot of attention to detail. Again, I don't necessarily think what I do or what lawyers in general do, at least, actually, I won't speak on anybody else. I don't necessarily think what I do is difficult. Um, it's just stressful. The urgency can kill you sometimes, but I'm not going to complain either because I definitely think that for what I do, I get paid well, very well. And I, I have a nice office job where I don't have to kill myself physically um, doing some sort of manual labor. Like I've seen my parents do that. I've seen my family members do that. Like I'm glad and privileged and happy and blessed that I am not in that situation. So for me to complain about having to work, I don't know, 10, 12-hour days sometimes in front of a computer, sure, my eyes are gonna get a little bit red and maybe teary from or dry from staring at a screen all day. But a lot of people already stare at their phones all day. So, anyways, like, what is the main big difference in that? And just I'm just working rather than goofing off on my phone. I've seen people with more screen time records on their phones than when I have billing at staring at a monitor. So I can't complain too much. I really won't. I will complain every once in a while, obviously, about certain thing. But overall, I think the experience has been great. The people have been great. Is it everything I've expected? Yes and no. I think it is everything I expected in the sense that I had some idea of the stress and urgency that this job was going to cause. I just don't think I was prepared or have ever felt that type of stress and urgency before. So obviously, at the very beginning, it was hard to accustom to that because, especially at the very beginning, I remember the first couple of months where I was just starting, everything seemed super urgent, and everything kind of is super urgent. Um, Even though all these deadlines are very much fabricated and not doesn't really exist, but then again, what deadline does exist, right? But what my issue is that because I was not, it wasn't super transparent, or sorry, let me rephrase that. Because I wasn't involved in deals really early on, there was a lack of transparency, and there was a lack of just simply understanding in what phase of the deal we were. So when somebody would email me telling them that they wanted me to do something and they didn't specify whether it was urgent, whether they needed it here in 2 weeks, and they like if they just didn't give any deadline, I just assumed everything was urgent. I just assumed they needed everything immediately, and that made me kind of stressed every single time I would hear the stupid Outlook chime off of my phone or my laptop, because like, oh, here we go again. And I would especially feel like that when I was doing something already urgent. I knew that it was already urgent, and then I would get another email asking me to do something else, and I didn't know if that was urgent too. But I've gotten better with time. I have a better understanding of what the deals I'm involved in look like. People have been really good at involving me from the start. And because of that, I have a better understanding of prioritizing my work. And I'm the type of person who really likes to get my work out early. I don't like to have things on my to-do list, that may be a flaw, could be a blessing, I don't know, but I really don't like things on my to-do list. I really don't like to procrastinate, and when I have something on my to-do list, I would prefer to just get it done and then just send it out. So obviously, with the right amount of time of doing my due diligence and drafting things, I don't just do it willy-nilly without reviewing or anything. I give it the time that I think is needed, but I do like to turn things in early if I can. um, so yeah, that has gotten a lot better. And I do feel like people have appreciated that. Not just the turning stuff in early, but knowing how to manage and just juggle a lot of things. I remember May. May was probably the hardest month I've endured so far. I billed probably 240 hours of billable work, and I don't really want to get into the specifics of what a billable hour is, but in short, the billable hour is just an hour that you can actually bill the client. So it doesn't necessarily equate for the amount of hours that you are like online. I could be online 10 hours a day and only build 6 hours, because those 4 hours I was either, I don't know, eating lunch with a partner for an hour, because you're not going to say no to a partner who wants to give you lunch, or helping out with some pro bono work, or just doing other office related things that you need to do, and it just doesn't go towards your billables. And the reason why that's important is the way that firms try to keep track, and or at least keep a metric of your performance, is the hours that you bill. And they try to incentivize people to obviously bill as much as they can with a bonus. And what I mean by build as much as they can is to just keep asking for work so that they can keep getting more billable work. I'm not saying to bill more than what you actually worked for, or yeah, you actually worked, but it's to just incentivize people so they can keep asking for work and be able to get more billables. Um, so with that said, with that said, put that in, when we're putting that in perspective now, May having 240 billable hours, I probably there's an additional 40 hours of non-billable work there, so it was a 280-hour month, and that was insane. I was working a lot. I was working long hours, really late. There was just a lot to do. There's a lot to do, and I was juggling a lot, and it was brutal. I got through it. I was hating myself at one point, and I kid you not, I at one point did shed a couple of tears because I was frustrated. I was really, really frustrated because it was a Sunday and I had my parents over and we were doing things and I was having such a great time and I wanted to keep spending time with them. And then out of nowhere, it was like 3 p.m. and I got an email saying that they needed help with something and they needed it soon. And that upset me so much because I didn't think it was urgent. I didn't think it was necessary in that moment. And, but, what am I supposed to do? What am I going to do? Say no? No. Like, so, I was frustrated because I wanted to spend time with my parents, but I essentially told them that they had to leave and I had to go back to work. So yeah, that was. Oh, another example that same month was it was my sister turned 15. She had her quinceañera, and I worked remotely for a week. I took one of my flex weeks, and I worked remotely. And in that week, it was again. There's a lot of things happening. Like it was because it just this is a normal thing. It isn't a normal thing. I'm not gonna blame any specific person for anything. It's just the environment, the stressful environment, and there was urgentness happening during the month of May, which is the why I had such a brutal month. I was just internally upset and think I can be. But anyways, I was working from home. I was in Vegas that week. Everybody in my practice group knew. I was working from Vegas because that's where my sister's quinceañera was going to be, and I had a lot of family coming in because of the quinceañera, and my parents were kind of being the was providing like space and rooms for a lot of my family members that I haven't seen in a long time. And it was sad seeing my family members come in and I wanted to hang out with them, but I was still working past 10:30, 11 p.m., sometimes midnight doing stuff, and it was just brutal. It was upsetting because I wanted to hang out, talk to them. And at one point, I kid you not, I was at the dinner table. We were having like a really, really late lunch. It was like 9:30, and I wanted to join, at least be around people, even though I couldn't necessarily talk. So I grabbed my laptop and I sat at the dinner table with everybody else and just started working from there. Now, should I have done that? Probably not, because I'd look kind of like a jerk in front of everybody else. But I don't think they took it that way. I think they liked that I was physically there, even if I wasn't mentally there. Um, so yeah, that was a brutal month. Every other month has been fine. May was probably the hardest one, and you'll see a lot of attorneys. If you ask them, especially those that work in big law firms, they'll have very similar stories, if not worse. I definitely think they'll have worse stories than that. But those are probably the two mm, biggest low points so far of the last year. Now, if I'm gonna mention a low point, I might as well mention a high point. Let's see. Work related, like it has to do with the actual work product that I've produced. Probably in terms of billable work, has to be that I have drafted a couple amendments to a credit agreement. I think it's the first main type of substantive document that I drafted, and there were very minor comments to those. That was a very, very, like, I was actually very happy about that. I was looking forward to receiving those comments because I just wanted to know where I was in terms of my skill set when it came to drafting these type of things. And since it was my first time, I didn't know if I was gonna get a lot of comments, but I did put like a lot of effort into it, and I was hoping that the comments weren't gonna be so brutal, and they weren't, and that actually made me very, very happy. So I was very, very happy at the fact that the comments were very minimal when they sent out. For my pro bono work, one of the high points of last year has definitely been being able to help these parents be able to obtain this a conservatorship over their daughter. And I know conservatorship has a very negative connotation to the word, but in this case, it really was needed. The daughter had a mental illness that just she couldn't take care of herself. She wasn't self sufficient, self reliant, and she was already turning. She had turned 18, so anything decisions related to like the hospital or just medical decisions, the parents were no longer able to make because the daughter had turned 18 and they needed this uh, paper to be able to start doing that. They needed the conservatorship to be able to start making decisions for their daughter again. And yeah, that was definitely a high point so far this last year, especially since I went to court. And I think I made a video about that, but if I didn't or you didn't hear the story, to just give a quick summary about that, I was actually supposed to go to court with my supervisor on the case. He was a partner, great guy. But because there was a conflict, something came up, we couldn't go anymore, and I was super nervous because I specifically chose, a more transactional practice group because I was trying to avoid going to court. I don't want to be a litigator. um, but now here I was going to court by myself, first time with these parents, my two clients, and I have a bit of a baby face, so I didn't know. I didn't want like and the worst part is like I think I was nervous for no reason because this was an uncontested issue. Like I knew I was gonna go in and I was gonna win. There was like no way I could have lost that because the other side had already agreed with me. We had already talked before and we already had an understanding that this is something that is needed. And so it really was just I needed to show up. Um, Summarize what I had already agreed upon with opposing counsel, and then the judge was just going to approve the conservatorship. But I was still very, very nervous. I remember talking to my Uber driver to court about how nervous I was, even though that's something I don't ever do. I don't really talk to Uber drivers or Lyft drivers at all. I'm not. That's just not the type of person I am. So, but I did. I literally told her. I was like, "Hey, do you know I'm going to court right now, and I'm really really nervous." And I'll never forget how he just responded. He was like, "Oh, okay," and then that was it. So it was, uh, yeah, it was very awkward to say the least, but it worked out. It was absolutely fine. I actually over prepared, and that's the type. That's the type of prepared the level of preparedness you want to be. Over prepared. You don't want anything to surprise you, especially in court. So yeah, that got approved, and it worked out, and everything was perfectly fine. Um, the other funny part about that story, though, is I was the only attorney there in person. I didn't know that we can just zoom in because at least the order that I got or the notice that I got made it very much seem like you needed to be in person. So I thought it was going to be an in-person hearing, and the judge was there, and he did appreciate that I was there in person because he straight up said that to me. He was like, "I appreciate you showing up in person," but every single other attorney had just zoomed in, so it was little old me in a suit that was probably a size too big, with my clients, and yeah, in a big courtroom that was just empty. So it was funny. It was funny to say the least. Great experience though. But I think that is everything that I wanted to talk about this last year. Oh, I guess one other thing that I did want to talk about is the bonus aspect of this job. I briefly mentioned it that was an incentive, and I guess I will highlight that as another positive. Is I came in this year not necessarily with the expectations that I would be able to hit my bonus. I just didn't think that it was going to be possible because I was told by a lot of people that it's not super uncommon, but slash not common. It's somewhere in the middle. Like it's a hit or miss that you can hit your bonus or not your first year because you're a first year and you're still trying to get used to everything, and sometimes there's just not enough work. So the fact that I was able to find enough work that people trusted me, because that's how I see it. A lot of people like to complain the fact, oh, they're giving me a lot of work, oh, they're giving me a lot of work. I try to see it, especially the type of work that I was doing. At least that's what I think. I definitely think that a lot of work that I was given was more substantive in the sense that like I felt like if they did not trust me with this type of work, they wouldn't have given it to me in the first place. So I see it as a good sign that they were giving me work and people were giving me a lot of work, because I just think that at least I think it's because they trusted me and I was able to do a good job in it. That I was able to hit my hours. Yeah, I was able to hit my hours. I'm going to get my bonus, and I'm very happy about that. So yeah, I guess I'll end it there. Yeah, that's all I want to talk about. Bye.